Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Cheryl White, and I'm a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Humanities at the Anton University of Suriname. I'm the founder and the coordinator of the archaeology program here at the university. Uh, so the LIDAR area of interest that I would like to discuss is a ring ditch, or what I refer to as a forest mount earthwork feature in the tropical forest zone vis-a-vis maroon settlements. So though Suriname has roughly 400 registered archaeological sites, they're all mainly situated in the geographic zone of the coastal plain. And this is a physically developed portion of the country, and it's about 10 to 15% of our landmass. The 85% of the remaining landmass, of which the tropical forest is a part of, is without the amount of identified heritage sites. So there's virtually no identified sites in this part of the country. However, research in Suriname's maroon history may help to shed light on this underrepresented area of interest within Suriname. So Suriname's African diaspora community is varied, but one of its most notable is its dispersed maroon tribes. Now, Maroons were enslaved Africans that escaped from various dispersed plantations in the mid-17th century. They often traveled southward via creeks into the deep forest and away from the open riverbanks. They created well-defined and formidable groups by the better part of the 18th century via plantation raids and bouts of guerrilla warfare with with plantocracy. And by the late 18th century, when peace treaties were signed with the colonial Dutch government, they descended to the riverbanks where they reside until now. So still in the tropical forest zone, but not in the dense bush. They're not in the bush proper, but along the rivers. So what's interesting about their mobility is that we believe that as they were traversing the tropical forest, they were appropriating old settlements that once were inhabited by indigenous people. Now, some of these settlements were located at intersecting creeks in the deep forest, but presented as a unique landscape feature in the form of a ring ditch or forest mound. These locations would prove to be a place of habitation, allowing for sustained agriculture of root tubers like cassava and demarcated places for ritual activities and living quarters. Now, Suriname had 6 maroon tribes. If you look at the map on the left, you'll see the distribution of them, and they're mainly throughout the tropical forest region. The largest is the Saramacans in the tens of thousands, and the smallest is the Paramacans, and they're less than 10,000 people, 10,000 members. Their presence on the landscape harkens back to how they used the landscape. So within Suriname's tropical forest zone are earthwork features or manipulated landscapes that can be described as ring ditches or forest mounds. There are reportedly dozens of these features identified and recorded in our neighboring country of French Guiana, but due to minimal work in Suriname's tropical forest, only 2 have been archaeologically explored. Both Kumako on the right, there's the image there on the right of it, and Pondo Creek, have the image on the left, have been radiocarbon dated roughly to the mid-200 AD, while Kumako also dates, radiocarbon dates to the colonial period. Now, both sites present clear archival evidence to support maroon mobility and sedentism in the area. In addition, both sites are held in high regard within their respective maroon groups, oral history about ancestral settlements and their origin story. And within the orbit of each location, numerous satellite settlements, or what is referred to as Negro villages, have been reported and can be corroborated by archival maps, so colonial period maps. Each site presents an opportunity to learn about pre-Columbian and historic period groups in Suriname's tropical forest. So both these sites, Kumako and Pondo Creek, have been archaeologically excavated. We know that there was a pre-Columbian presence there, but we also know that there was maroon or historical period presence at both locations. So why is LIDAR important for the tropical forest zone in Suriname? It can potentially help us understand the settlement patterns of pre-Columbian peoples, which we have a very little information about in our tropical forest region. It can help us understand appropriation of pre-Columbian settlements by historic period peoples, which is a very common theme found throughout the literature of African diaspora archaeology. It can help us understand mobility and sedentism of these communities of Maroons people that traversed many parts of South America, not just Suriname, but Colombia, Brazil, even a bit in French Guiana as well. And there's also a matter of understanding spatiality and distribution of material culture across the tropical forest. We do have quite a bit of archaeological evidence in the form of ceramics, glass trade beads, colonial period, ammunitions, bullets, and things of that nature that all speak to the various activities that occurred at both types of, at both Kumako and Pondo Creek. And it also helps us understand intrasite variability. So for us, LiDAR would provide a fantastic opportunity to better identify these ring ditch locations and the various sites that are associated with them. And thank you very much.
Okay, my name is Joanne Mullenberg. I'm a policy officer of the Ministry of Education, Science and Culture within the Archaeological Service of Suriname. And the presentation will be about archaeological research and stakeholders in Suriname. So this is an overview. First, the archaeological areas of interest, ground disturbing activities, and some case studies of the young coastal plain and the tropical forest. Archaeological areas of interest for Suriname are the coastal plain, the tropical forest, and the southern savannas. The coastal plain is the northern area, northern part of Suriname, which has the most ground disturbing activities in regard to farming, land, roads and structure activities, and other ground disturbing activities. The tropical forest is mostly the interior with the indigenous and Maroon communities, which has at this point in regard to the coastal plain not a lot of archaeological sites. And the southern savanna has mostly surface finds till this point. The ground disturbing activities in Suriname can be divided in regard to small and large scale mining areas, which are also in a green belt area around the Rupicola Lake, and the deforestation which comes along the small scale activities, as well as the FSC certified concessions from where timber is exploited. The young coastal plain has a lot of pre-Columbian archaeological sites as well as historical archaeological sites. Sites are discovered during the farming activities of farmers in the coastal plain, as well as the infrastructural projects in regard to roads and structures, and the mining of natural resources. These are not gold or other natural resources, but more the shell-rich formations which are exploited, as well as the black soil or the terra preta, which is exploited for farming or garden material. So I already said that there are various types of sites in regard to the coastal plain, mostly are pre-Columbian. So there are various stakeholders in regard to these sites, mostly indigenous communities, but also the farmers or the concessionaires who are, the areas are not one excavation or site has the same stakeholders. There's always a different kind of people who are active at that point. So for the tropical forest, we have a lot of indigenous and Maroon communities, and they we try to make them a part of the excavation, or at least what needs to be done. For the cave site Rupicola, which was found in 2019 within a concession, it was not part of the Asia research, and it was only because one of the environmentalists asked us to investigate the cave that we discovered that it was actually an archaeological site. It's probably pre-Columbian. It was expected to excavate in August last year, but due to the pandemic, we only will be excavating or starting the excavation this year in August. For this project, we asked the indigenous community as also the Maroon community to do a blessing ceremony. It's something that we always asked before the actual research or excavation starts, since these communities, they think it's important that these ceremonies are done. So it's also a custom within Suriname. Furthermore, they will be part of the project while excavating. We asked the Maroon as well as the indigenous community to appoint a person who will be excavating during the project. This is also a way of creating more awareness for archaeological research in Suriname. And from here on, we try to make, to see how this will go and also to implement this for other projects. So concluding is that we don't have a lot of data yet. There are two LiDAR projects of which we know of. One was at the Jurgen Savannah historical site for the nomination of the World Heritage Site. The other is for a mining company for its concession, where a LiDAR research has been done. That's the only, it was not even for archaeological research, but it was just in general for the mining activities. There's a lot of stakeholders which we need to keep in mind. For example, the communities, the governments, and all its ministries which are involved in regard to the ground disturbing activities, but also to the cultural, social-cultural research. NGOs and the land or concession owners. LiDAR would give us opportunities before ground destruction activities would actually take place, and would also make the field work easier in that sense that we would be way more prepared for going into the field than without, since the field work in these areas, especially in the tropical forest, is quite harsh. And if we can pinpoint it with LiDAR, it would save time and money and our personal investment. Thank you for listening.
My name is Santosh, and today we'll be looking at plantation accessories, as you can see at my title, Deciphering Silent Waters. So I will give a small overview of what we'll be talking about today. We'll be looking at the history of plantations in Suriname, the history of plantation accessories. Secondly, at the location of the plantation, the layout of the plantation. We'll be looking at Suriname's geomorphology very quickly, and also we'll be touching base on coastal erosion of Suriname and the effect it has on plantation accessories and other plantations. We'll be using plantation accessories as a case study. During 1667, when the Dutch and the British exchanged Suriname for New York, when they signed the Treaty of Breda, we can see on English or British maps that there were around 178 plantations. And by 1785, it grew to an amount of 591 plantations across whole Suriname. And at first, the plantations were located more inland of Suriname, and when the fortifications such as Fort Somersdijk and Fort New Amsterdam were introduced at the confluences of rivers, and the polder system was introduced, the plantation slowly shifted from inlands to closer to the coastal plain, or to the coastal plain, closer to the ocean. And initially, the plantations were actually only sugar plantations, and later on, cotton, coffee, and cocoa were introduced. Here you can see that Alex Constipian, a famous historian on Suriname, shows the spread of our plantations in Suriname. But in 1735, you can see that in Paramaribo, Wanica, and also Camawena, you can see plantations. The spread of plantations. 1790, it increased. By 1825, they reached other districts, Nikeri, Camawena, and Saramacca. And by 1860, you can see that the amount of plantations immensely dropped. So we'll be focusing on the cotton era in Suriname. The Biri lands were lands close with the ocean that were swampish and low and always full of water. And the people thought that these were useless lands until the owner of plantation Felix started to plant cotton between his coffee shrubs. So it was a great success because the first year he exported around 2 to 3,000 kilograms of cotton, and slowly but surely it doubled every year. The other plantations saw this and started mimicking, and the Biri lands were amazing grounds to grow cotton shrubs. So here you can see in the figure, Katun, by 1795, there were 39 cotton plantations. By 1825, it rose to 73, and by 1890, they completely disappeared from Suriname's economy. Here we have plantation accessories. Very shortly, it was first established and named An Barbados in 1796, and slowly it had different owners and different names. By 1850, it was named Plantation Accessories, already named Accessories, and it was owned by two Dutch brothers named with a family name Bots. And by then it grew from a 250-acre piece of land to 850 acres. And by 1890, it was completely deserted. We did some archaeological excavations, and this is a drawing, a CAD drawing of the known locations. And as you can see here, in 2010, the shoreline was much more towards the sea, towards the north, and 9 years later, in 2019, it washed open a big piece, and these structures were then revealed to us. We recorded a total of 10 structures, including a factory, workers' houses, houses for the enslaved, and planters, and the planter's house of the owner. And the location of Plantation Accessories is located at the confluence of the Atlantic Ocean right now and the Warapa Canal. The Warapa Canal is a man-dock extension of the Warapa Creek, and was described in many archives to have been an amazing place, very beautiful, where very rich people used to live. Uh, Here you can see that Paramaribo is very far from Plantation Accessories. It's another district, Comowena, and can only be accessed by boat. It's very remote, and there are very nice descriptions within the archives describing the journey to Accessories. So we have a small drone image of the site, and what you see in front of you are the remnants of the uh, uh, quarters of the enslaved. I will also speak a little about Suriname geomorphology, focusing on the young coastal plain and the old coastal plain. So the study area, I'm so sorry, Suriname can mainly be distinguished into three major landscapes: the coastal plain, the savanna belt, and the Precambrian shield or basement. And if you see on this picture, if you look, you will see a very light brown colored uh, uh, piece here. That is the young coastal plain, and right beneath it, we have like a light orange colored piece. That is the old coastal plain. I will keep it at that because I want to show you here a picture or a map by um, one of Suriname's archaeologists. It's actually Dutch. Um, uh, Meneer Versteeg, at Versteeg, he documented a lot of pre-Columbian archaeological sites which are represented on this map. And most of these recorded sites are situated within the old and young coastal plain. And Plantation Accessories among them is also situated at the coast, in the coastal area. So not only do we see that a lot of these sites are pre-Columbian or historic, but you have a lot of pre-Columbian sites also. So the coastal erosion in Suriname, I will briefly discuss. In front of Suriname, we have 5 to 7 mud banks or mud flats. And these mud banks or mud flats migrate towards the west. And they have a cycle of 30 years. So it takes 15 years to make and 15 years to uh, break. That's important to know because one of the main things that affects any coast are the amount of sediment that is deposited or eroded. So when a mud flat is in front of how you say a piece of land or coast, it protects it, and it also develops like mangroves and plants that protect the the land behind it. But between two mudflats, you have the interbank area, which is not protected and erodes away. So Plantation Accessories is currently situated within interbank area. So in 2020, when we went, we saw that, or we thought that the place is being conserved because structures were being washed open. But when we went a few weeks back in 2021, May, we saw that the current, not only are new structures being washed open, but we also see that the current structures are also being damaged slowly by the ocean. So, in conclusion, we do not know in which phase of the 30-year cycle Plantation Accessories is situated. We do not know how long it will be above the ocean for us to see. Important to note is that it's only visible during spring tide, full moon for 6 hours a day. So that's why we need to act now because Plantation Accessories is a unique, how you say, Plantation Accessories is unique for Suriname and for the world because it gives you an opportunity to explore the spatial layout of cotton plantation, how when they flourished, but also how the people lived and um, how they tackled the ocean and the waters around them. That's why it's very important because most of the plantations in Suriname that people know of and visit are coffee and sugar plantations. So with this, I would like to close my presentation and thank you for listening.
Hello, I'm Louisa Daggers. I'm the archaeologist at the University of Guyana, and I'll be presenting on the vulnerability of Guyana's coastal archaeological site. So just a little bit about Guyana and where we are. We're the only English-speaking country in South America. We're part of the Guyana Shield, and we're also considered part of the Caribbean. We're bordered to the north by the Atlantic Ocean, to the east by Suriname, to the south and southwest by Brazil, and to the west by Venezuela. Guyana is divided into 4 natural regions and 10 administrative regions. Our areas of interest are within the shaded area cream and orange. This is the low coastal plain and the hilly sand and clay belt. Guyana's coastal plain and sandy belt presents the unique opportunity to investigate human ecology, landscape change, and the human-climate interplay by applying a multidisciplinary approach. Ongoing research within this area include the application of isotopic analysis to investigate archaic environmental change, resource exploitation, and population mobility. Discussions are also ongoing about embarking on plantation archaeology. However, this is still in its infancy stages. Sites within the area of interest along the coastal zone include the Northwestern Shell-Midden Complex, which is associated with shellfish exploitation during the mid-Holocene. To the south of the coastal plain is the Racefield Complex within the Berbice area. These sites are associated with horticultural adaptation and pottery in the mid-Holocene. Within these natural regions include a number of historic colonial plantations, which contribute significantly to understanding the history of present-day Guyana. However, very little archaeological data exists on plantation sites due to the lack of research. Important to know that ongoing archaeology within these regions does not take LiDAR into consideration as a result of poor access to resources and LiDAR technology. Given the geographic distribution of archaeological sites within these 2 natural regions, and more specifically our areas of interest, these sites remain increasingly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and economic development. And this is particularly evident in the increased volume of rainfall that Guyana has been experiencing over the last few years. And more recently, we have experienced extreme rainfall, which has resulted in the complete inundation of sites within our areas of interest. This coupled with the fact that Guyana is 6 feet below sea level, poses a number of risks to archaeological sites, including erosion, flooding, and saltwater intrusion. Economic development also contributes significantly to the loss of sites, and this is becoming a major issue along the coastal plain. Amongst the issue of site destruction include shell-midden mining for the purpose of construction and further destruction to sites as a result of agricultural expansion and housing development. This coupled with the fact that Guyana has recently discovered oil, we are also experiencing economic boom on the coast and major development on the coastal plain, which is going to pose a threat to archaeological sites. The impacts are further exacerbated by poor land use planning and a lack of CRM infrastructure geared towards archaeology and site management. Hence the need to urgently embark on documentation of Guyana's archaeological landscape to inform research and also to create a record for future generation. LiDAR scanning is going to change the way that we do archaeology and conservation in the Amazon. And this is going to provide a unique opportunity for us to document our archaeological landscapes. I think this brings me to the end of my session. Thank you so much for having me. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Hello, Mark Plew, Boise State University. I've been working in Guyana for some 30 years. The archaeology of Guyana documents considerable variation in human occupations that span several thousands of years and are characterized by a variety of settlement subsistence patterns, which include the use of the rainforests and the mixed resources of the savannas. On the coast and around the swamps of Northwest Guyana are areas characterized by numerous shell middens. With the emergence of modern conditions, the archaeology of the Northwest includes early to middle Holocene periods of broad spectrum foraging and later horticultural occupations. The early and middle Holocene horizons are characterized by the pre-ceramic Alaka phase, which is now dated to between 75 and 3000 BP. Mounds range up to 80 by 30 meters and are between 1 and 15 meters in height typically. Subsistence varied seasonally and over time, but so the use of not only shellfish, but birds, fish, and mammals. These periods correlate with episodes of increasing and diminishing sea levels, which alternately left significant portions of the coast inundated. Archaeological features of the early archaic Alaka phase include, as known from Barabina and other mound sites, fire-cracked rock features, concentrations of lithic debris, hearths, storage pits, post molds, suggesting structures and burials. Although generally considered a pre-ceramic phase, Williams, on the basis of pottery found at Barabina and Horsaguaro mounds, has suggested that ceramics occurred as early as about 3,500 years ago. Mound burials of adults and children document preferential treatment of the dead and suggest some degree of social stratification and differentiation. The archaeology of northeastern Guyana, while not well known, is characterized by the Abari phase and by Hurtenritz culture described by Wimmer. The Abari phase is includes sites located between the Abari and the Berbice rivers. It is a forest pattern utilizing both interior and perhaps coastal resources. The settlement pattern includes use of primary and secondary resources. The second pattern, although similar to that of the Abari and settlement subsistence and material culture, includes the presence of habitation mounds and raised fields. Typical of the pattern is the Joanna Mound on the Kanji River. This is a mound measuring some 90 meters in diameter, rising to 0.5 meters above ground level, circled by a moat. Near the Berbice River and in the vicinity of Fort Nassau are hundreds of raised fields, suggesting significant horticultural activity. Recent excavations of sites in the vicinity of Dubalay Ranch along the Berbice River include the large Dubalay Mound, a highly stratified mid-Holocene context that contains substantial ADE and with dates ranging between 6,200 and 4,700 years ago. Excavations have identified a Dubalay complex that consists of Dubalay 1 and Dubalay 2 phase ceramic materials, which are similar to materials found in southern Suriname. In central Guyana, near the Mazaruni River and in the Urukwama Rainforest Reserve, are significant Middle Holocene occupations that include habitation sites, manufacturing stations, groundstone features, and petroglyphs. The early to middle Holocene dates have been argued to date between 7,500 and 3,500 years ago, again suggesting a pattern of some broad spectrum foraging. The settlement pattern of the early to middle Holocene period is one of sites occurring along major river courses near falls and at outcrops, rock outcrops. The horticultural period in Iwakrama dates from 3,000 years ago, where it's associated with the appearance of a polychrome ware. Recent discoveries indicate that similar wares were being produced locally or traded between the Iwakrama area and the North Rupununi. The settlement pattern in Iwakrama is one in which horticultural villages and encampments were located on large river terraces and their falls and estuaries, suggesting a continued emphasis upon fishing during the horticultural period. To the south, early to middle Holocene occupations of the Rupununi savannas are thought to date again as early as about 7,500 years ago, though most Rupununi sites appear to date to the late Holocene and early historic period. Sites are characterized by a range of late Holocene and early historic period sites, characterized by a range of chipped and portable brownstone artifacts, features that include a range of grinding surface depressions and sharpening grooves, geometric rock alignments, stone cairns, and circles are very common. Extensive evidence of rock alignment, or rather rock art, includes petroglyphic rock art, characterized by broad line and deep groove techniques, and often combined with dots and furrows. The settlement pattern is characterized by open villages along major rivers, and with the use of caves and rock shelters in adjacent forests. The late horticultural period is thought to reflect the historic Makushi and Wapishana patterns, often containing 18th and 19th century European trade goods. Pictographic locations in southern Guyana appear considerably different from petroglyphic locations and elements from the petroglyphic sites of the area and within the region. Located in caves and rock shelters, many pictographs consist only of smudges, slightly bending furrows and waving lines, and other relatively nondescript elements with few geometric and zoomorphic motifs. These resemble those sometimes associated with entopic images. At the present time, the absence of but a few dated stratigraphic contexts prevent an adequate delineation of the temporal distribution of material cultures and lifeways of prehistoric Amerindians across Guyana. As such, future investigation will need to more widely identify the distribution and range of site types within major physiographic and environmental areas, and conduct excavations that permit the development of more detailed chronologies while collecting paleo-environmental data needed to suggest long-term shifts in procurement strategies. Such research will provide important insights regarding the regional human ecology of Guyana, and as such contribute significantly to the archaeology of the Guianas and of adjacent areas. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michelle Hamblin, and I work for the French Ministry of Culture. I'm an archaeologist in French Guyana, and I wanted to talk rapidly today about the state of LiDAR in the territory. So LiDAR has been used here for over 20 years, and my colleague Stefan Rostem will tell you a lot more about that. I just wanted to say who's doing it and what coverage we have for the moment, and maybe some things that might be interesting for our colleagues in Suriname. So, like I said, LiDAR has been used here for over 20 years. Like many countries in South America, we have a huge rainforest coverage. We have a huge forest coverture. Over 95% of the country is forest. And I'm using a report done by a student in 2019 who estimated that maybe 6% of the territory has been covered by LiDAR. Now, probably the same thing for everybody. It's mainly along the Atlantic coast and up part of the Maroni River Valley in 2019. Now, we have several actors and organizations who intervene and do LiDARs. There is a project with the IGN, that's our National Geographical Institute, to do LiDAR across basically all of French territory and many of the overseas territories, except for French Guyana, probably because it's just such a big bite to take. They didn't see it as being doable. So that's one option that we don't have for the moment. On the other hand, there are state organizations and public agencies who do LiDAR for planification, watershed studies, research, a whole lot of things like that. And basically, we all work together to have a most complete picture of the territory as possible. So some of the agencies that are important actors in the acquisition of LiDAR are the Water Office, or the Water Authority, donc the Office des Eaux, Office de l'Eau, the National Forest Service, which is the ONF, the Parc Amazonien de Guyane, so it's a national park, which covers a big portion of the south of French Guyana. Then there are research organizations like the IRD and the CNRS, as well as public actors like the EPFAG, which is basically organized around urban planning. And two last agencies are the DGTM, which is the French state organization agency that is in charge of basically managing territorial planification, watershed, urban planning, protecting the environment, and also the DCJS, which is the agency I work for. And we are part of the DGCS. I'm sorry, the DCJS, which it depends on the prefecture. And our interest is archaeological research. Now, like I said, in 2019, the estimation was that 6% of the territory had been covered by LiDARs. So, like I said, the Atlantic coast and part of the Moroni Valley. Since the Archaeological Service has done a very ambitious program on the Aproad River Valley and has worked with the PAG, the PAG, the National, the National Park Service, well, the National Park of the Amazonian on a big program called the Meminipan. So we work as partners sometimes. Sometimes we just check and make sure that somebody else hasn't done a LiDAR there, and we try and make sure that the LiDARs are interesting for everybody's use. Let's see here. Now, just really quickly, I talked to somebody from the DGTM, Michel Maillot, who told me that last year there was a huge acquisition of LiDAR on the Moroni River Valley, and it covers both sides of the Moroni. And this may be something interesting for colleagues in Suriname to check out. Obviously, it wouldn't go too far into the country, but it could be interesting for well, detecting earthworks and such. And let's see here. As far as perspectives go, the DGTM will also be doing the same on the other side to the east of French Guyana on the Oyapock River Valley. I don't know if there are any Brazilians here in the seminary, but this might be interesting for you too. Well, so that kind of gives the a sort of an overview. Obviously, LiDAR is extremely important for us and for everything from pre-Columbian earthworks to colonial installations to detecting agricultural and agricultural sites that were the French prison system until the 1950s. And we are always interested in continuing to acquire LiDARs, and well, we're open to suggestions.
Bonjour, I would like to present the LiDAR potential in French Guyana. French Guyana, like the other Guyanas, can be separated in two main environments. Coastal one, that is a low plain in front of the sea, and the inland, forested inland, on more than 80% of the territory. This is important because the condition to make aerial archaeology are different between these two environments. First, along the coast, there is very few forested areas. Basically, we are in flooding savanna and swamps, so it is easier to see archaeological traces directly on the ground on these savannas. In this way, many raised fields, pre-Columbian raised fields, have been found during these 30 last years, and only by flyings with ultralight motorized and studying stereoscopic photograph. Because of the spatial center in French Guiana, we are lucky to have a very detailed covert by aerial photograph made for years by the National Geographical Institute in France. So it's possible to study this photograph and to have an idea of remains of the past along the coasts, especially. Here you can see a map of the central coast, where all the red spots are race fields complexes. Here you have a detail of one of these spots full of these small mounds that are agricultural remains of pre-Columbian inhabitants. Moreover, we can also see clearly some remains of polder that are this other methodology to cultivate in flooding area imported by Dutch people in Suriname and after in Guyana and then in French Guiana. However, we don't have so much polder as in the neighboring Guianas. Basically, these are the two main agricultural techniques that can be seen clearly by flying or by photographs. However, some of these structures are sometimes hidden by the forest, like rice fields that are found during cruising in the coastal forests. So another approach is necessary to find them, especially in this forested patch along the coast and inland, which is covered by the forest. The first attempts to find remains were made in colonial habitation, like in the La Caronil habitation near Cayenne, where agricultural beds have been found thanks to LiDAR. A complete interpretation of this habitation has been made with the master house, the slave houses, and small and large agricultural beds around the habitations. Looking at the historical map, the potential to find more of such habitation is high, because along the coast and along the main rivers, we know that many habitation has been settled. Finally, the potential to look at the superficie of surface of the French Guiana is high, but sometimes remains can disappear. Here we have a clear example along the coast, where small agricultural beds that we can so clearly on the 55 pictures disappeared completely 30 years after. So potential, but probably early tambien to make the inventory and classification of these remains. Thank you.